Cut. All right, so I'm Jeff Linwood, and I'm up here from Austin, Texas. And I came to the last Dallas Drupal camp and had a lot of fun talking about mobile. And this is what I'm going to talk about here too, is building mobile applications for Drupal. Most of what I do is actually native iOS and Android development. So I'm actually building the mobile apps using Objective-C and Java, which is really cool. It's actually what I found really exciting is to get into the mobile world, build all these cool mobile things. And what I find really interesting is everyone has all these cool Drupal sites, and now they're looking to go mobile. So what I want to talk about is how you can actually take skills you already have today, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, combine that with a couple of things I'm going to show you here, and you can actually get started, in the mobile web, mobile app world. So it's a really cool set of things that are coming down the pipe that really make making a mobile app really easy in like 2012. And with Drupal, you've already got the content, you've already got the back end, you've got the server situation. It's a really cool combination of things. So here's an example of an app that I built a client recently. This is actually an iPad app. It's also an iPhone app. One like source code base. This is actually a native app, so I wrote it in Objective-C. But the cool thing is that this is actually a Drupal site behind it. This actually communicates with Drupal using services. But everything you see here is actually not HTML. And so, but the really cool thing about it is that the amount of work that I had to do to change Drupal was very little. As a matter of fact, there was no actual Drupal development done. Everything to do to get this totally awesome, I think, iPad app was just site building from Drupal. So, if you know how to configure a few modules, set up some views, and set up a services endpoint, which I'll show today, you can totally get your entire Drupal backend set up to be ready for mobile apps. So I just think that's totally awesome. Now the other side of this is how do you build a mobile app? And so I'm going to show off some pretty cool tools. Two of my new favorites, PhoneGap, and then there's this little company called Codica out of Madison, Wisconsin, and I'll show you their tool. And so that's pretty cool. So I get this a lot because I'm a mobile app developer and I've been talking to a lot of Drupal people and speaking at Drupal events. And they all want to know, can you make my Drupal site an app? And the answer to that, of course, is yes. So like I was saying, these things go really well together. I was up at DrupalCon last month, and sort of the keynote by Dries up there was how Drupal 8 is going to be all about mobile. There were basically three big things that he had, and mobile was one leg of the Drupal 8 triangle. So there's been a lot of work with the Drupal 8 mobile initiative. Most of that work is actually focused on responsive design. So all of the core themes in Drupal 8 are actually going to be responsive. So they'll work from smartphone all the way up to big desktop. They're also making admin mobile friendly. So right now, I don't know if you guys have tried to use admin from an iPhone or something. It is not a pleasant experience for a million different reasons. And so there's a lot of work going on with the Drupal 8 mobile initiative to really get that going. I've been working on just updating the Drupal 8 mobile documentation, and I have a link at the end of the presentation. It's to the Drupal 8 mobile guide. It's perfectly valid for Drupal 7 because there's nothing in it that wouldn't work in Drupal 7. And frankly, pretty much all of it probably works just as well in Drupal 6. And what that is, it's sort of like a handbook to show you guys here's how you do mobile web. Here are resources. It's not the one true way of doing it, but there's 16 different ways to build a native app. Here they are. And here's links to people that have blogged about this for Drupal. So stuff I think is really cool. So you can use Drupal, and set up your content types, set up your modules, and bring in all that functionality you need for an app. Drupal already has stuff like OG built in. It's got all kinds of geolocation stuff that you can just use to build your apps. So this is really all you need to build a mobile app, is the stuff that you guys kind of already know from doing Drupal. The technologies are different. I mean, you're not going to take your straight up HTML, your straight up JavaScript that you're maybe a little bit used to. It is a little bit different when you're dealing with the mobile web and dealing with some of the mobile web toolkits. But you already know this stuff. You don't have to go and learn Objective-C. You don't have to learn Java. You don't have to kind of get buried in all that stuff. So another thing people ask me is like, what is an app? And really what I'm talking about here is something that you can download from either like the Android market, which they just renamed to Google Play, or from the Apple App Store, or from the BlackBerry or Windows Phone equivalents. And that's really just something that's running natively on your device. It's not a mobile website that you would get to from mobile Safari or mobile browser or whatever on Android. We're talking about an actual app you would download from the App Store. And there's a couple different ways to do this. The first one is really native. And that's going to be Android. That's going to be iPhone. That's going to be iPad. That's going to be Windows Phone. These are developer-centric in the sense that they're not set up to do like a site building type thing in Drupal where you can kind of create your site. They're definitely much more of like a coder type thing. HTML5 is mobile frameworks. With that, I'm really talking about jQuery Mobile and Sense of Touch. Those are probably the two biggest HTML5 mobile frameworks, and probably the two best in my opinion. Some of the others aren't as well maintained. So I kind of find that like when you're going down this route, like really the Drupal world has huge support for jQuery Mobile and very little support for something like Sense of Touch. If people are doing Sense of Touch with Drupal, I wasn't able to find any really good examples of that to put into the HTML guide. But I definitely think you should consider Sense of Touch. It's another toolkit. It's got some interesting licensing in that has a GPL version and a commercial version, but both are free to download. So definitely something to consider there. Last, and this is what I'm going to talk about mostly in this presentation, is PhoneGap, which is also called Cordova, if you've heard of that, but pretty much everyone still calls it PhoneGap. What PhoneGap is it basically provides native app functionality to your mobile web. And so the deal with the native apps is that you get access to all the cool things on your phone. You get access to the sensors like the accelerometer, you get access to the camera, you get access to the geolocation, you can get access to the file system and store stuff there for caching. You can do some really cool stuff with native that you cannot do with mobile web. Like right now, you can't use mobile web on your iPhone and get access to the device's camera. Now, I do think that will change. I mean, when you look at like the way things are going, there's going to be a time when it's like, iPhone 7 or something, when a website can just access the camera on the phone. I don't think we're that far away from that. And then the need for PhoneGap will go away. But that's actually always been like the stated goal of the PhoneGap project, is to go away. Because what it really is it's that bridge between the native world and the mobile world that lets people use the mobile web to build these like cool apps without actually having to know how to program for Java and Objective-C. And as an added bonus, because you're developing for mobile web, if that mobile website works in iPhone and it works on Android, then you have a cross-platform app, which is really cool too, because then you don't have to develop twice. So there's definitely some reasons to go with PhoneGap. So just a little more talk about native apps. Here's an example of a native app. And this is not mobile web, this is native app. And this is a really simple one that just shows like a Google map with some stuff on it. But you can do some cool stuff with native apps. They're definitely much sleeker than mobile web. One thing you'll find is that jQuery Mobile, the animations are slow on iPhone and they're slower on Android. So it's not the native experience. So it's one of these things where when you kind of decide what you're building for, when you're building for PhoneGap, a lot of times you have to consider who's going to be using it. And in a lot of ways, I feel like jQuery Mobile is a better solution for like in the enterprise type environment where you're building a mobile app, but you're not kind of competing in that consumer world where you're kind of judged on your user experience, like harshly in the App Store. So I do think that's one thing to consider with PhoneGap and jQuery Mobile. When you go down that route, try it with users. Make sure they like it. Make sure it doesn't feel too weird. They're improving it, but there's definitely limitations from mobile web to native app. So these are just the two programming languages you can use to build native apps. A toolkit you might use for building a native app in iOS is AF networking. And what that is kind of the secret to making a really cool app work in, either for Android or for Java or for JavaScript, frankly, when you're doing mobile, is to use asynchronous networking, which basically means that you're not blocking the whole app when it goes to download something from like basically your Drupal server, because that can take time. You're not, you're going over a cell phone network, you're going over, something slow, you don't want your whole app to kind of lock up. You almost want to do things like in the background. And these are like kind of these little things that kind of help your app seem a lot more fluid. So this is just like it's a library to look at if you start developing native apps for iOS. And then for Android, the equivalent is this guy, the async task. And he's actually built into Android. You don't have to download him. But he's what you'd kind of look at to see how to build sort of a network-based app in Android. So the real question is, do you want to build a native app? And there's a lot of reasons why you would or wouldn't. Building a native app generally is more expensive than building a PhoneGap app, a mobile web app. You have to find iOS developers, Android developers. And usually the time frame for building one of these can be more than just building a mobile website, especially if you've already got Drupal going and you've already got kind of people in-house that can do that stuff. It's definitely a little bit easier to get started on mobile web. So going into that, what's PhoneGap? And like I said earlier, it's where mobile web apps get smartphone features. And that's really all you need to know, is that you're building a mobile website, but you're adding all this cool smartphone stuff into it. And you're actually making an app so you can sell it in the App Store. Here are some of the things you actually get access to. The big one's really the camera. You can take photos, you can record video, and once you open up those two things, you can do a lot more with mobile than you can in the mobile web. I've worked on projects with PhoneGap that involve like video, and that was pretty cool actually. It works well with Drupal. Push notifications. So basically, you can alert your users that something happened, they got a message in their inbox or whatever. Drupal doesn't have great support for that yet. So that's one thing to consider when you look at it, is that the easiest way to add push notifications to a Drupal site is to work with a third-party site called Urban Airship. And they're kind of like a third-party provider that manages this sort of thing for iPhone and Android. And even that's not simple to set up, though, I will say. Geolocation, you can actually do this from HTML. It is possible. But it is a feature on the, particularly on the iPhone, you get this access to this stuff called geofencing. So for instance, we could set up a geofence in Dallas. And whenever if you're running my app, I can set up a geofence in Dallas. And then I can let you know that when you're in Dallas, hey, there's a Drupal meetup in 2 hours. But if you're in Houston, no go. Like, I'm not going to bother you. So just something to think about is there's all these cool things that Apple adds into these iPhone apps that face recognition, the latest version of the iPhone OS, I can write an app that actually uses that can actually detect people's faces and put do something with them. Now it doesn't know who they are. It just knows that looking at a picture, there's faces here, and then maybe I could set up to tag them with users from Drupal. So there's all these cool things you can do that are not possible right now with mobile web. And then last is maps. I happen to think that the native apps on the smartphones, the native map, is actually a lot slicker than, say, trying to use Google Maps through JavaScript. So that's something to consider if you're building a mapping-based application. A lot of times, I think that native might be the way to go. So this is a little plugin that I wrote for PhoneGap. With PhoneGap, you can download plugins from GitHub or whatever, and they're basically extended functionality from PhoneGap. So a lot of people have extended PhoneGap to work with the native Twitter support, native Facebook support, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of bring some of these really cool features from the native world over into PhoneGap. And I guess backing up and explaining what a plugin really does, it is a piece of functionality that is inside your app that now you have access to from JavaScript. And it's just standard jQuery type JavaScript. So if you're familiar with kind of that jQuery model, it's basically you have an event and we fire it or whatever and send something off to Drupal through this guy. So, can you actually put a PhoneGap app up in the App Store Android market? A couple years ago, there was some kind of to-do about putting PhoneGap apps up in the Apple App Store, but that's not an issue at all anymore. Don't worry about that. Android market, they don't check what you put up, so it's fine. I mean, it's true. You publish it and it goes live. On the Apple App Store, it takes 7 days for them to approve it, usually. So that's something you have to factor in too. Is that with web, right? It's okay, we have this massive change. We're just going to release it Friday night and move production and it's up and down 2 minutes or whatever you do, right? With iPhone apps, there's a 7 to 10 day lag time. Now you can request this thing called an expedited review, but even then Apple doesn't always grant it. So you have to actually test your apps at least in the Apple world, because otherwise, you know, you put them out and the thing like doesn't work, then you just like ruin everyone's apps because they'll download it when they update, and it could take like 7 or 10 days to get a new app out. So it's actually really important that you test these things. You know, so that's something to consider too. With Android, if you screw up, you know, it's like just go back, make another one, put it back up there, you're good. So Go responsive, like also at DrupalCon this year, really the big focus was on responsive web design. There was a lot of talk about responsive web design, and I'm not going to cover that here, but you can definitely do that. I mean, like, there's no reason you have to use a mobile web toolkit like jQuery Mobile or Sense of Touch. You can just build a responsive website, add your app features like the camera. You know, maybe there's a special part that's only available in your PhoneGap app, and then boom, your Drupal site's an app. So definitely something to consider there if you've already done the work to go responsive. So some PhoneGap tips. This is the big one, is that debugging in PhoneGap on the app, like it really stinks. So like what you want to do is build your mobile website and just use Chrome, use Safari, like use the stuff you normally use to debug. Don't try and do it from like the built-in emulator or the simulator on your phone. It's painful because there's like this debugger called Wimera, but it's just painful to use. And then most annoying thing is that you won't even know what like your errors are because it's just very frustrating. Don't try to do as much as you can in Chrome or Safari first to like build everything out. This is like something that's like recent, and this is what this basically means here is that anytime your app talks to an external server, i.e. your Drupal site, you need to tell the PhoneGap app like that it's talking to this what's called whitelisted external host. There's a config file on the iOS side. It's called a plist, and you just need to add it there. It's like one step, but if you don't do that, your app will fail, and it won't be obvious why. So you have to remember to do that whenever you access anything from like another site. So even if your Drupal site like is, you know, dev.drupal.com or whatever, but your images are hosted on a CDN or something, guess what? You have to add that CDN in there. So it's kind of obnoxious.
Can it handle wild code?
I think so. So I mean, it's not totally obnoxious, but it's like you have to be aware of like why or why not your app might fail. And now you will get a log message, so you should see it while like debugging. But again, it's like you have to be looking for it, and not just be like, okay, well, I was in the middle of coding something else and it broke. So that's like, find new plugins on GitHub. This is basically like you heard about this cool feature that's in iOS, like the built-in Twitter support. Well, that's not going to be like an official plugin for PhoneGap. That's going to be sort of like something that's on the side that you can find. And the reason for that is because that doesn't exist on Android, it doesn't exist on BlackBerry, and so like they didn't really code it for that. But if you want to just, for instance, when you're building an app for the new iOS 5, you can actually, set up a Twitter account on your iPhone 4, 4S, 3GS, and just log in there once. And any app you build, a native app or a PhoneGap app, could have access to that Twitter account, so that I don't have to like, I mean, it'll ask you. It'll say, I can just put a little button that says tweet. It pops up a little Twitter thing, and then I could write my tweet inside the app, and it goes out under my account. But as a developer, I didn't have to code anything to do that, other than like 10 lines of code that you can kind of just cut and paste. And so that's really cool. It's like I didn't have to build in anything there about logging into Twitter and OAuth and all this other stuff you had to do before. It's like super easy because Apple just built it right in. Test it on real devices. So basically, especially when you're using the camera on Android, each Android phone has like a different camera. And so you're going to run into like weird memory issues and all kinds of other fun stuff that when you actually get this on an actual device is very different from running it in the simulator. Just to back up, if you're on a Mac, you can actually use a free tool called Xcode 4 on pretty much any recent Mac. And that actually lets you set up a PhoneGap application and run it and run everything on what's called the simulator, which is basically kind of a, like a version of the iPhone. I'll show it to you in a sec. But it's a version of the iPhone that actually runs on your Mac. And so you can actually test your app without having an actual iPhone. If you want to test on a real device for Apple, though, you do need to pay them their $99 Apple developer account. And that'll actually let you first test on real devices, and then second, publish an app on their App Store. Now, it's free to publish an app on their App Store. They just charge you per year, whether you're, to be a developer or a publisher. With Android, you can actually develop on Windows, Mac, or Linux. All the developer tools are free, and it doesn't cost anything to develop on a device. And it's 25 bucks to Google if you want to publish an app on the Android market. So, how do you do this? From the Drupal side, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's a couple modules. Now, I mean, this is like the most kind of basic stuff. I mean, once you get into like, okay, well, I need to add, geo something, then you need to add more modules. But that's a Drupal issue of just, you'll need geofield. So the big module that I use is services. There is another way to do this. So I'm using services because everything wants to talk JSON, which is the JavaScript object notation. And it's a really good way of passing data in between different systems. Services makes that really easy. There is another way of doing it. There's stuff like views data source, which is another module that lets you spell out views as JSON. I haven't had a huge amount of luck with that. And then also, it doesn't. You'd have to go through services anyway to get access to like things like comments and like individual nodes really easily. So I just use services. There's another little guy called services views, and I use him because he basically connects views to services. As part of services 3.1, you get the REST server. And then to talk to the Drupal IaaS SDK, you'll need the REST server plist support. And then there's also CTools, which you'd need. But that's like not really part of this, but it's required for services. And then the cool thing is, whether you're building for Drupal 7 or Drupal 6, basically services 3 is the same. Like I've used it on both, and I don't know of any particular difference. If you're still on Drupal 5, can't help you. So, but here's basically the modules you need. So this is actually the services like administration screen, and I don't particularly find this to be particularly well designed in terms of how to do things. But this is under site building services in Drupal 7, and then basically what you want to do is you want to add a resource. And what a resource really is it's basically an endpoint for other systems to hit your Drupal site. So other apps, I mean, using services, you do not have to just use it with native apps. You could use it with like other websites. There's all kinds of things that could hit that. But basically, each one of those should probably get their own endpoint. So if you're building like an apps type of thing, they probably all just can hang off one. But so you basically just add right up there, add an endpoint. And this is the dialog that pops up. So you have your name. I just called it REST because this is a REST server. You have two choices of servers, REST and XML RPC. I find REST to be a lot easier to work with. I don't really write any XML RPC code. I've seen it before, like people that I've seen demo like Titanium use XML RPC. I don't know if that's just because it's better supported on that particular platform. There's a path to an endpoint. And what that basically means is that on your Drupal site, it's just going to hook into that URL. So for instance, it would be, in the one I'm going to show off, it'll be dev.d7phonegap.getpantheon.com/rest or whatever. And then session authentication is really important to know because you can either have a completely anonymous API. So basically, there's no user login, there's no, anything like that. You're not worried about people authenticating to your site. You can either have that or you can not have that. It's a security thing. Do you want your users to authenticate to your services? Yes or no? And then, this is a little bit confusing. So you get this screen, and this is my first one that I already had was plist services. I just add the REST one, and now I need to edit resources. And here's what resources are. Resources are basically all these things that services can publish to your apps or to whatever else. The first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these came with services. The last one, views, was that services views module. Scattered all throughout the internets, you'll find other resources, such as like the solar resource, which like hangs out somewhere on GitHub and doesn't work so well. But it's kind of weird. I don't know what's up with the services people. So anyway, you have comments, you have files, you have nodes, users, views, system is connect. And what I'm showing off here is that basically, if you want people to authenticate to your site, they want to log in, they want to keep an authenticate session, You select this dropdown and then check this guy, and that opens up System Connect. And then, same kind of thing. So under node, maybe we let people coming in from our apps do retrieve. They can pull up a node, create a new one, update it. But we're not going to let them delete one. Just, your decision. The cool thing is that this is all still tied in Drupal's permission system. So it's not like you're just opening up the farm here by saying that people can create nodes. It's still dependent on their actual user account, granting, getting the permission granted within Drupal to create a node. So you're not just like totally opening up everything. One thing.
That would only be if you made them authenticate, though, right?
Only if you make them authenticate. Or if you had anonymous and you were letting them retrieve nodes or create nodes or whatever anonymously, then basically what this does not do is it's always going to be more secure than your Drupal permissions, but it's never going to be less secure. Does that make sense?
Even if they're anonymous, it's still going to go by the roles. Whatever you gave anonymous to have permission to see.
Yeah. So anyway, the important thing here is this is really just where you set up services. And then once you have this set up, this is really like all you need to do to configure Drupal to be a back end for things. Now, you need to set up views or whatever that actually are going to reflect your iPhone app content or what have you. I mean, you're not shortcutting anything here. But this is really all it takes to set up Drupal as a back end. And if you've done like other kind of website development type stuff, the great thing about this is that really you didn't have to do a lot to get this endpoint set up. It's definitely a lot less complicated than these things used to be. So there's some really basic architecture stuff here. What I'm going to talk about is basically there's two ways of doing mobile web. One is to let the mobile web basically be a theme on your Drupal site, which is a totally valid way of doing things. Really, the only mobile theme that I've seen that it kind of works is jQuery mobiles. It's actually just a theme you can put on your Drupal site, configure a whole bunch of stuff, and you actually get a mobile theme that looks pretty good, in a mobile web browser. I'm actually going to talk about things a little bit differently, where the Android app, the iPhone app, and the mobile web all go through services to talk to Drupal 7. It's a different mindset because in this case, the little mobile web, the PhoneGap app that we're building, it doesn't live on Drupal. It actually lives inside the app, and so it actually uses that same services layer to communicate with Drupal. So this is just kind of cool. Now we've got our services set up. With Drupal 7, basically, you can actually, that's really, all you need from the Drupal side to set up that you can take a picture with your phone and send it to Drupal. Now, video is a little bit tougher because you actually have to configure a whole bunch of video modules. But once you get those configured, it's actually, like that as well. So I want to show off a couple different things here. One thing that I found really interesting is this tool here. So I don't know how many people have actually started playing with jQuery mobile, but it's kind of cool. jQuery mobile takes kind of the jQuery approach to things, but the thing is you program it in HTML, but it's not like the HTML you're familiar with. There's so much of HTML5 data back stuff, and everything really looks different because it's mobile. And so there's a little company up in Madison, Wisconsin called Codica, and I think it's just two guys. And this is actually like a rapid prototyper for mobile apps that are based on jQuery mobile. And so what it really is, and I'll show you, and this is free to sign up. I think they have like a 30-day trial or something like that. I think it's reasonably priced, but I just have like the free version where basically I can't save my projects or whatever because I've been using it for more than 30 days or whatever. But I just find this to be like a really cool way of getting started in jQuery mobile. And what it is actually it's drag and drop. And so I can take my page header up there and change the name to Drupal, Dallas Drupal or whatever. And then you go down here and drag a map in. And then just drag a button in or whatever, and it's call level 10, whatever. And so what's kind of cool about this is not building your mobile app for you. What it's really doing is it's creating this this HTML prototype of a jQuery mobile app. And so it kind of takes care of a whole bunch of things that like are kind of hard to visualize when you're working with the HTML directly. Like here's a list view, and I can change the divider name to be menu, and then change the button's name to be whatever, home. And then you can link to a different page, because when you set up a jQuery mobile site, it kind of has its own internal page linking structure. You can set up transitions. A lot of this won't make sense until you kind of start digging into jQuery mobile or whatever. But I just found this to be like a really cool tool to first of all, you can do a really cheap and easy mobile prototype. So you're talking about building an app, right? And it's like, okay, we can kind of visualize it, whatever. Well, with this, whether you're going to build it native, PhoneGap, or whatever, before you get started like wiring it all up to Drupal and worrying about all that stuff, you can actually sit here and start dragging and dropping stuff and just see if your app like makes sense, which I think is really cool. So, go in and add a new page, call it whatever, and maybe that links to all your, maybe this has a link to whatever else in Drupal in Dallas. I don't know. Other places, whatever. So, you kind of get all these like cool things over here to play with, and so, basically, I don't know what exactly you'd be, building with this, because it's kind of depending on what you want to prototype. But what I can do now is I can go up there to download HTML, which is up here. And that will download the HTML. It's just like this little gzip HTML file. Let's see if it goes. Download. Apparently. Well, here it goes. So here's like app.html or whatever, and then we can open it with, whatever. Oh no, it's not coming.
Here it is.
There it is. Oh, look, because I'm using text edit, it's freaking obnoxious. Well, anyway, that's not really the point of things. Basically what you're downloading there is the app.html or whatever, and so that's actually like a jQuery mobile HTML page that you can go in and like you reuse inside like your PhoneGap jQuery mobile app or whatever. You can build a whole structure with this and then fill it back in with Drupal stuff. Now this is in no way connected to Drupal. Now obviously this would be a really cool tool if like you could just drag and drop for your content types over here or something and just have it all magically appear, but they're not quite there yet, and I don't think Drupal's even on their radar. They're just building like a prototyping tool. So this is something I kind of wanted to share as like, okay, I thought it was cool, and it's a really cool way just to get started building mobile web stuff without really driving really deep into like the jQuery mobile stuff. Yes, yes. Balsamic's really cool, but the thing with Balsamic is that like if I was building this app, it doesn't get me that much closer. Also, actually, I find this a little bit easier to use than Balsamic in a lot of ways. Like Balsamic's nice, but it's not perfect. Yes, yes. Balsamic might have a way, for instance, to export to like something I could actually show on my phone to someone, but I've never really played with it to do that. So I don't know. I know it has like a clickable PDF, but I've never really felt the desire to sit there and haggle with it. So, but I mean, Balsamic's totally a valid way to do mockups as well. So that's like one thing I want to show off. And then here's something else I was going to show off. And this is basically like, it's a lot of stuff, but what this is basically a little Drupal PhoneGap app that basically talks to a server that I have configured just like I showed you with the slides. And that is over here. And you can tell this is a super fancy Drupal 7 site that's about an hour old. Cleverly hosted over at Get Pantheon. And really all this has views and has services and services views. And what it is basically is, it's basically these are camera pictures that I took. So the cool thing about this is, I used that Drupal plugin I took. And then let me show you what you're looking at. So this is basically like this is like a little jQuery mobile PhoneGap app that I built. And the source code to this is up on GitHub under my account, GitHub/Jeff Linwood, and it's called like the Drupal PhoneGap app. But anyway, so it's just like a little sample app basically. And what you're seeing here is this is one isn't refreshed because it's like been sitting there, but it's actually pulling down the front page view from the Drupal site and rendering it as basically like what's called a list view in iOS, but it's a jQuery mobile list. And then I'm pulling out the image from image cache and stuffing that in like the left-hand side of that guy, so it kind of looks cool. The name of it is just the name of that node, which is camera picture, because I didn't put in a way to like change that. Settings is where you'd log in or whatever. So kind of cool. So what I'm doing, and you can't really see it here because like this is actually that iPhone simulator that I was talking about that kind of goes together with Xcode. And so this is running the actual app here. It doesn't actually have like the camera feature built in, but I can upload a photo from like the saved photos of this little guy. So it's that guy there, the cinnamon roll. So it's kind of like what you're seeing. And so like I can take the picture here, and then it should upload to the Drupal site. It's thinking, which can take a little while with Wi-Fi. So we take that guy, and then he should be you guys should be up top now on my mini Instagram of fun. It's missing a little bit to make it worth $1 billion. I don't know. I don't know if that's Pantheon choking or the Wi-Fi. Yeah. Well, what's funny is like it should work.
We all say that when we're demoing.
Exactly.
It should work.
Well, what's funny is it's the app works. The the app's 3G connection works, but
does it allow for like an upload progress?
It actually has an upload progress. Like I don't know. This is actually good. Hey, there it goes. Yeah, no, that's you guys. But you're like cleverly not oriented right because that needs to be fixed. But yeah, exactly. That's what makes it worth $1 billion. It's the details. So but yeah, that's actually coming off the phone there. So kind of cool. It is using, I will show you the code. It's actually using the Drupal plugin. So, here we go. So there's a take picture button. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here. Take picture button. And that's a jQuery mobile button. And then that maps to some JavaScript up here that basically take picture button. So it's this guy here. And what I'm doing is I'm binding to the tap event. And then there's a little guy there called navigator.camera.getPicture. And what that is, that's actually the PhoneGap, like basically get me a picture. It looks like 4 lines, but it's actually just 1 line of JavaScript. And all it's doing is it's passing like basically 2 JavaScript functions, one for like this is a successful camera or this is a failure. And then passing some configuration parameters. And then basically what happens is if this is successful, it goes to that capture success.
No wonder it looks over at its quality 20.
Yes. Well, and that's the catch is that like I didn't have a chance to update this. With the new services, I actually don't have to worry about that. It's a memory management issue with PhoneGap.
Okay.
And basically the way you fix that is by either cropping the photo before you send it or scaling it down. The easiest way to do it is set the quality low enough that like the camera doesn't crash, especially during a demo. So let's see, capture success was, sorry, there it is. So here's capture success. And so I believe you asked about the progress indicator. That's actually right there, that home.activity. And so that was actually, you can't see it because I didn't show it on this, or you couldn't see it on the phone, of course, but that's actually an activity indicator, which is kind of cool. And then, so what I'm basically doing there is I'm just creating a Drupal file. And again, I kind of need to update this because they also cleaned up Services 3.1. It's not released yet, the 3.1 dev, but I can actually create now a node and a file in the same call, which is kind of cool. So anyway, just creating a Drupal file and basically coming down and creating a Drupal node. And
You said that's a plugin you wrote?
yes, this one here. Yes, it's all on GitHub.
Is there a link to
Yeah, at the end of the presentation, there'll be one to GitHub, Jeff Linwood. But yeah, it's up there. And then I'm not saying that's the only way to go forward with that, because that Drupal plugin, I'd prefer it was actually obsolete and just replaced with like a really cool Drupal client.javascript. But such a thing does not exist. So if there was such a thing, it would make your PhoneGap life a lot easier. So something to work on. So anyway, that's basically it. It's saving the node. And that's basically what it does. So it just saves the node to Drupal, and then it refreshes the home screen. And then the home screen says, hey, Drupal, show me what's on your front page. And then it gets the view back, and it gets the same 3 nodes that are up there now. And that's basically a Drupal site.
You can't use something like jQuery Ajax in this case?
You absolutely can, but you absolutely can. The catch that is kind of weird with Services 3 was basically uploading, and they fixed this. You can actually now upload as like multi-part form data with like the newest dev version. I just didn't have a chance to get it working today for this. So why doesn't he repeat the question?
Okay. I was asking whether or not you could actually use just regular jQuery Ajax to make the calls as opposed to a PhoneGap plugin.
Excellent question. Another thing you can actually do too is you can actually, if you want to get kind of a little bit hacky, you can skip the whole services layer and just use jQuery Ajax to upload directly into your like create node type forms. So definitely a possibility if you're already used to programming that way. So, but yeah, there's no particular reason that if you didn't want to construct that yourself, you can just use jQuery Ajax. Not a big deal at all.
I wrote a little library that might be helpful in that
Cool.
situation. It's called Drupal.api.js under GitHub.
Okay.
It's basically a JavaScript abstraction for services.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly what, and this has come up before, is like a lot of people are kind of looking for that, so that's awesome. Cool.
Yeah, so I'll give it to you and I'll show you afterwards.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So that might have been the most show and tell that is going to be part of this. Let's see.
So PhoneGap got bought by Adobe, or
Yes.
guys got bought?
Yes.
So what is Adobe doing with it? I mean, I don't have...
No one knows. I don't think it matters.
The
It's,
little drag and drop thing you did, I mean, I was thinking, it's like, man, if they started doing that.
well, so
I mean, they're a little anti-iPhone. They don't, want to do stuff.
Well, Adobe's had like all kinds of weird stuff going on recently, especially with like the Flex stuff and Air and everything. I have no idea what their mobile strategy is. Maybe it's PhoneGap. I don't know. But they contribute everything to Apache, so at least it lives there. I have no idea what services they're going to provide around PhoneGap in the future, how they plan to monetize that. They don't know either. Probably is why they're not saying. So I don't know.
They've integrated it with Dreamweaver in some way.
Well, yeah. I mean,
But that was before they bought it, so I don't know why they bought it. It's like, yeah. There's also like 3 or 4 other people that do basically what you just saw with PhoneGap. Like the Sense of Touch has like a built-in thing that actually lets you build those iPhone apps from Windows. I haven't tried it myself because I'm not really much onto the Windows platform, but I don't know why it wouldn't work if they say it does. So something to consider if you don't have a Mac but want to build iPhone apps, you can use Sense of Touch and use their little tool. This thing here is something that I kind of worked on a couple of the pages for, and that's the Drupal.org mobile guide. And that's really like probably the best resource, and that would be a great place to like put that JavaScript client library stuff. And you can just edit that yourself if you want. Like right now. But it would be like, just like before everyone forgets it, right? Yeah, but like you know what I mean. Like this is kind of like where like it's like a handbook of like all the different approaches you can use for mobile and Drupal. So I think that's definitely like something where first of all it could probably stand to be better fleshed out, and then second of all it needs more examples. I've got like a whole bunch of stuff in there that I just like nobody's using this with this, or I can't link to a blog post. So it's like I can't really show people using stuff in Drupal, if there's nothing to show. But there's some really good examples there for using Drupal with PhoneGap, and there's some really good examples for using Drupal with Titanium, which is a cross-platform tool that you program in JavaScript to do iPhone and Android development. I didn't talk about that today, but yeah, so that's really good. And that would be where I'd like probably send you to like get more information. And then there's some information about me. This is my blog up there, and then that's my little company. And then there's my GitHub and my Twitter. Cool. Well, that about wraps up what I have to say. Does anyone have any questions? So, yeah. Well, I guess probably everyone already asked them. Anyway, so that's about it. You don't really have too much else to do, but anyway, come find me if you want to talk or whatever.